The idea behind the racing line is quite simple. It is the line that has the largest radius possible through a corner. It goes from the outside of the track, cuts really close to the inside, and goes all the way to the outside on the exit. Usually referred to as outside, inside, outside. Any other line you could draw through a corner would have a smaller radius than the racing line. So why is that hypothetically a good thing? Well, with a larger radius, a higher average speed can be carried through the corner. This is because the speed that can be carried through a corner is a function of how much lateral grip the tires have. In order to understand this, we will make some oversimplifying assumptions. We will tackle why these are oversimplifications in just a moment, but for now, let's assume the following. The centripetal acceleration a motorcycle experiences in a corner follows the equation for circular motion. The friction force the tires experience follows the dry friction equation. When we combine these two equations and calculate the maximum velocity given the motorcycle's mass, the coefficient of friction between the tires and the tarmac, and the radius of the corner, more speed can be carried through larger radius corners. This is the reasoning behind the racing line, but there are some things missing here. Firstly, I think it's important to point out that pneumatic tires, such as those on a motorcycle, do not behave as classical dry friction theory would suggest. Rubber generates friction in three major ways: adhesion, mechanical keying, and wear. Furthermore, pneumatic tires are sensitive to load. As they are loaded up, the coefficient of friction decreases. How much load each tire sees depends on how the rider is positioned, trail braking, throttle control, weight bias, speed, and of course lean angle. When a motorcycle is leaned over in corners, the suspension system is at a disadvantage, meaning it is not able to soak up bumps as well as when the motorcycle is straight. Because of this, leaning over decreases the amount of available lateral grip, and the amount of available grip is less predictable the higher the lean angle. So the longer time a racer leans over in a corner, the more risk they're taking. What can be done to minimize the risk? Well, the answer is obvious: spend less time leaning over. This can be achieved by squaring off the corner. A squared off line is achieved by releasing the brakes later than for a traditional racing line, turning in quick to get the bike on the right trajectory, apex the corner late and at a slower speed, and then being aggressive on the throttle on the exit. The reason loss of throttle can be used on the exit is because less lean angle is being carried. But wait, would riders willing to take more risk get faster lap times by always following the traditional race line? No, there's a lot more that goes into figuring out what the best line is, which includes what comes after the corner. Is there bumps, cracks, and gravel anywhere? Is there any camber or elevation changes? Is the rider being followed or chasing another rider in a race, or is it qualifying? What are the strengths and weaknesses of the bike? What are the strengths and weaknesses of the opponent's bikes? What are the strengths and weaknesses of the tires? And of course, what does the rider prefer? All of these aspects affect what the best line is for the given corner and situation. If there is a long straight coming after the corner, then a squared off line will allow the rider to accelerate for longer, and thus reaching a higher top speed at the end of the straight, resulting in faster lap times. Squaring off corners is also beneficial on bikes with lots of power, since more time can be spent accelerating. In MotoGP, you will see Marquez on the Honda and Dovizioso on the Ducati use squared off lines quite often. Now there is a big downside with a squared off line when being chased in a race, because it opens up for an inside pass on the brakes. Of course, a squared off line can also be used to pass a rider using a traditional line, which you often see MotoGP riders do. In MotoGP, a traditional line is sometimes referred to as progressive cornering. This is where the rider releases the brakes early, smoothly roll the throttle through the corner, retains a lot of speed at the apex, and continues to roll the throttle progressively through the exit. Riders such as Alex Rins on the Suzuki and Valentino Rossi on the Yamaha frequently use this style of cornering. And in his prime, Jorge Lorenzo was the king of smooth, progressive cornering. In some cases, it actually makes sense to apex early. This means the rider is carrying a big amount of speed on the entry and is forced to slow down significantly on the exit. This might all be done to line up a perfectly squared off line going on to the following straight. If a corner has a big amount of positive camber on the inside and less so on the outside, it might make sense to keep more to the inside of the corner. A positive camber means less lean angle is needed for a given speed and corner radius. Bumps in the middle of corners might force riders to take a less optimal line as well, to avoid the risk of upsetting the bike. The tires used always have some inherent strengths and weaknesses, such as how durable they are or which lean angle range they are optimized for. You often hear commentators talk about how riders are using a defensive line or guarding their line. What does that really mean? Well, in a really tight race, the leading rider will often go about a quarter out from the very outside of the track to defend their line from being passed on the brakes on the inside, as well as blocking riders from being too close if they're going to square the corner off. You will also see riders such as Marquez and Davi square off corners less if they are leading and blocking passes. During these types of races, they use a mix between a perfect progressive line and a completely squared off one. So how do riders figure out what the best line actually is? Well, practice, observing other riders, and walking the track. Being able to figure out what the best line is a crucial part of what sets the best riders apart in MotoGP. Remember to subscribe to my channel. There's always something new to learn.
It's gotta be against the law to look this damn good. Cause baby, I feel real good and I wish I would. It's gotta be against the law to look this damn good. Everybody watch out. Watch out now. I'm ready for a good time and I came to groove. The whole band's here and we came to move. Got a fresh haircut and 2 new shoes. We're here all night like we got nothing to